Okay, tonight we are going to be where everybody wanted to be when this all started many weeks ago. We're going to look at the book of Revelation, not the entire book, but part of it. And from this point to the end, or almost the end, we will be looking at end time information. This will be things that the premillennialists believe are going to take place. And after tonight, a lot of it, you'll know where I'm coming from. I have a view that is not the only view of Revelation, certainly. It is, I believe, a substantial view. If you have been in my class, I taught this months ago, and you may not even remember being in the class on Revelation, but there won't be that much new material for you, but it will be helpful as we go from this point forward, comparing what the premillennial view of Revelation is to what I believe the biblical view is. You have the right to disagree with me. You have the right to decide that you don't agree with what I'm fixing to say. I believe what I'm fixing to say is accurate and certainly defendable, but I don't believe that I have all knowledge, therefore I know it all, therefore it must be this way or else. So I want to get all those caveats out of the way before we begin. All right. Is the book of Revelation still waiting to be fulfilled? Has it been partially fulfilled? Or could it be that it's been completely fulfilled? And those are going to be some of the issues we're going to look at tonight. I will assure you that the premillennial view is that none of the book of Revelation has been fulfilled. It's all waiting to be fulfilled sometime in the future in the millennial kingdom during the 1,000-year reign when Christ comes back and establishes the kingdom and then eventually takes his children, takes his followers home. John Walford says that the book of Revelation is the centerpiece, his quote, not mine, is the centerpiece of premillennial doctrine. In other words, this is what a lot of it's based around, is their interpretation of the book of Revelation. He goes on to say that Revelation is a classic presentation of premillennialism. The Apostle John made it clear that the things that were written in the book of Revelation were going to transpire. So they haven't yet, according to Mr. Waller. And therefore, since he hasn't seen it happen yet, he concludes that it's yet to be fulfilled. Now, I want you to look at something. I need someone to read Revelation chapter 1, the first 3 verses. Don't everybody jump at once. Let's just calm down.
The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show to his servant, the things that must soon take place. He made it known by sending his angel to his servant John, who bore witness to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, even to all he saw. Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear and who keep what is written in it, for the time is near.
All right. Now, he clearly says that what is about to be told is, what is the time frame given? It's near. Okay. Near is a relative term. We could debate what near is based on whether we're looking at all eternity, for example, or something around here. For example, if I were to say to you that there is a chance of a snowstorm coming and it is near, you would kind of go with maybe tomorrow. Okay, since it's sort of been forecasted. But you wouldn't think it was very far off, or else I would not have used the word near. All right. Now, I want you now to turn to Daniel. We're going to spend some time here, but I think it's very, very important that we get some things understood. All right. Beginning in verse 1. In the third year of King Belshazzar's reign, I, Daniel, had a vision after the one that had already appeared to me. Okay, now, when was the third year of Belshazzar's reign? You wouldn't know that offhand. I wouldn't expect you to know that offhand. However, if you want to check it out, it was 550 BC. Keep that number in mind. Now, skipping down to verse 13.
What chapter did you say?
Still in chapter 8 of Daniel, right? 8, skipping down to verse 13. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another one said to him, how long will it take for the vision to be fulfilled? The vision concerning the daily sacrifice, the rebellion that causes desolation, and the surrender of the sanctuary and of the host that will be trampled underfoot. All right. How long will that vision last? Verse 14. He said to me, it will take 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary will be reconsecrated. All right. So, the vision, we're not going to deal with the vision, that's for another time. But the vision ends with the cleansing of the sanctuary. Okay? You've got a problem with the sanctuary being desecrated by the Romans. It'll turn out to be. And then it will be reconsecrated. And when is that? Well, the cleansing of the sanctuary took place in either 165 or 164 BC. Depends on how you date things. I mean, but it's in that general ballpark. As 167 BC, Antiochus for Epiphanes desecrated the temple by erecting a statue of Zeus in the temple and using pigs as sacrifices. Okay, again, Roman invasion, and you see the temple is desecrated. You put a statue of Zeus in the temple, and you sacrifice pigs, which of course must have been just horrendous to the Jews who were seeing this take place because of their understanding from God of how pigs were to be treated, and they certainly weren't sacrificial animals. But they see this take place. Now, it took place on December the 25th, just in time for Christmas, which worked out well. 167 BC. They didn't know it was going to be Christmas, but who knew? They could have sold things back then. All right. In 164 BC, which is 1 year later, you have it's very interesting to me that on December the 25th, again, I mean, to the absolute year date, you have Judas Maccabees, who comes in and cleanses the temple, and the Jews still celebrate that day today. And do you know what day, what it's called? This one you should know. Because the Jewish people celebrate, have a celebration at the same time Christians are having what we call Christmas. Hanukkah. All right. So Hanukkah is a celebration of Maccabees coming in and cleansing the temple, reconsecrating it and so forth, after it was put under and destroyed and desecrated by Antiochus for Epiphanes. Now here's what I want you to get. So from the time a division occurred until its fulfillment was less than 400 years. You follow? You got 550, you got 167, 164, and it's fulfilled. Less than 400 years between when the prophecy was given and when it was completely fulfilled. All right, now, so what? Daniel chapter 8 and verse 26. This is important for what we're dealing with here. The vision of the evenings and mornings that have been given you is true, but seal up the vision, for it happens in a distant future. All right. Daniel hears the vision. Here's what's going to happen. But seal it up. Why? Why don't you want me to tell people about it? Because it's going to happen in the distant future. Now, what apparently would God consider the distant future? 400 years. I mean, it's 400 years before it's fulfilled, less than, but in the ballpark of 400 years. And yet he says, I want you to seal it up. It's too far into the future. Don't bring it up right now. Okay? Now, why have I said all that? What does all this prove? All right. If 400 years is considered the distant future, what about 2,000 years? Would that seem to be a wee bit into the future? Now, Revelation is going to be fulfilled in the near time, according to what John wrote in the first 3 verses of Revelation. Because God says, what I'm fixing to tell you is going to be fulfilled is in near hand or near, depending on your translation. So whatever Revelation is about, whatever it is concerning, is going to be fulfilled apparently in at least less than 400 years, because earlier in Daniel, God says, that's too far into the future, seal it up, we're not going to deal with it. Why would that be? Well, we can only speculate, we don't know. But obviously, the people who hear us prophecy, it's not going to be fulfilled for 400 years, there's a good chance none of them are going to be around to see it anyway. So why would you want to tell them something? What good would it do to tell somebody something and say, this is really, really, really important, but it won't happen for 400 years? You'd probably go, well, it may be really, really, really important, but I'm not going to be around to hear about it anyway. Why tell me? Well, what benefit will it serve to make a prophecy, for God to make a prophecy to people, followers, believers, and in the case of Revelation, Christians, and say, Okay, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen, but you'll never see it. Well, I mean, God can do what God does. Don't get me wrong. I'm not limiting God at all. But in a logical, rational world, if something is 400 years into the future and God said it's too far off to worry about, seal it up, don't share it, don't try to figure it out, Daniel. Don't explain it to them, just seal it up. We'll deal with it when the time comes. So the book of Revelation opens up with the time is at hand. What does that mean? Well, that means it's going to be considerably less than 400 years, because he wants the people right then, as soon as John finishes writing it, that letter, those letters containing this information went to churches all over the world. All right. Now, when something is at hand, what does that mean? Well, let's look at a couple of scriptures and see if we can figure that out. Need someone to read Mark chapter 1 and verse 15.
The time has come, he said. The kingdom of God has come near. Repent and believe the good news.
Okay. The kingdom of heaven has come. It is, in some versions, it says it's near.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Jesus is talking to the disciples. What is the kingdom here? What kingdom is he talking about? Whatever it is, it's near. And it is the church. Okay. So how far into the future was near there? Not very far. Because he even says that some of you standing here will see the kingdom come. It will come in your lifetime. Why? Because it's near. Not 2,000 years off, not 400 years off, but it's near. Look at Luke chapter 22 and verse 1, please.
Repeat.
Luke 22, verse 1.
You want somebody to read it?
Yes, please.
Now the feast of unleavened bread, called the Passover, was approaching.
All right. It's near. It's near. What was it? It's going to be the Last Supper. In this case, when is it going to take place? Very soon, because Christ serves that meal before he's crucified. So when you see this word or this idea of something being near, it means it's very, very close in time to when it's being prophesied or spoken of, as the case may be. Now, notice, I'm going to just, you don't need to look at this unless you want to make a note of it. But in Ezekiel chapter 12, beginning in verse 21 and going forward, verse 23 says that the days are at hand. And in verse 25, it says there's no more deferring. Whatever's going to happen is not going to be put off any longer. It's going to happen right now, which is just the opposite, okay, the prophecy in Ezekiel, we're not going to deal with what it is. It doesn't matter right now. But the point is that the prophecy that Ezekiel receives, he is to let the people know because it's fixing to happen. It's not going to be delayed anymore, which is just the opposite of what Daniel was told. Daniel was told, what I'm fixing to tell you is so far into the future that we'll deal with it when it comes up. But for now, God says, I want it to be sealed up. All right. Revelation, I'm going to read it again, and we'll comment on it. Verse 3, blessed is the one, chapter 1, blessed is the one who reads the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear it and take it to heart for what is written in it, because the time is near. In other words, what's fixing to be read in Revelation, or at the time the statement's made, what's fixing to be written by John and be later known as the book of Revelation is going to take place in a very short period of time. He does not say what the time is, but it's going to be relatively short. The material written in the book shall shortly come to pass. If a writer was unable to explain the phrase shortly come to pass, okay, let me ask you, y'all are not biblical scholars. You don't claim to be theologians. But if I ask you, what does it mean, shortly come to pass, what are you going to tell me?
Gonna come pretty soon.
Going to come pretty soon. I mean, we may not know. Now, did you get that, Ed, from the Greek, by the way? No. Ed didn't need the Greek. He could have gotten it from the Greek had he read the Greek. But he doesn't need the Greek. Why? Because it's so obvious. All right, now, if you read that statement, that what's fixing to come is going to come to pass very shortly, and you have difficulty explaining that, okay, which to all of us seems relatively obvious, why would I want to trust you on the rest of the book if you can't even explain that part to me? If you take something that's so obvious as that wording, and you say, well, now that could be a long time off, or that, I'm not sure what that means. And that's what the premillennialists will do. They're going to say that, I'm not sure. Okay, we can all plead ignorance on about anything and say we don't know. But the problem being that if you don't understand that, then why would I want to believe what you think about all the symbols of the book of Revelation? If you can't get this part, I can't very well trust you to get the rest of it right. Because we may have disagreements on what various symbols in the book of Revelation mean. And I think we have there's room for discussion, there's room for disagreement on specific things. But I don't see how you and I, or a premillennialist person, can read that verse and somehow come away with the understanding that what is fixing to happen, fixing to be written or fixing to be read, would be any time except right now or very soon. All right. Now, if that's not enough evidence of that statement, Look at the last part of it. Turn to Revelation 22. We'll go from one end of Revelation to the other. Revelation 22 and verse 10 says, then he told me, do not seal up the words of the prophecy of this book, because the time is near. Okay, remember Daniel was told to seal it up. It's 400 years off. We know it was 400 years off. Daniel didn't know that, but we know it is. So God didn't want 400 years to be discussed early, but he says, don't you dare seal this one up, because what I'm talking about is happening soon, near, immediately. The phrase is rather straightforward, and yet the premillennial scholars who are able to interpret and explain all the symbols of Revelation have difficulty with this phrase. Now, I'm not putting anybody down. I'm not raising anybody up. I'm simply saying, if you read that sentence in some other context or other than the Bible, would you not come to the conclusion that whatever's going to follow is going to take place relatively soon? Is that some sort of wide jump in logic to go with that? And I cannot come up with any other explanation than that what is going to take place in the book of Revelation is going to happen very soon. Now, look at right above that. Look at chapter 22 and verse 6. The angel said to me, these words are trustworthy and true. The Lord, the God of the spirits of the prophets, sent his angels to show the servants the things that must soon take place. Now that's at the end of the book. Okay, he started off in the beginning saying it's near, and he ends at the end of the book. He says it's fixing to take place.
He also said he was coming soon. Does that mean the fulfillment of what he wrote in the book?
What? I'm sorry?
He said, and behold, verse 7, behold, I am coming soon. So what was he speaking of?
What was he speaking of there is he's coming in righteous indignation to deliver the saints from the Roman Empire. I will contend, get back to premillennialism in just a second. I will put forth this idea. I believe that the book of Revelation was fulfilled during the time in the time that the people lived who read the book. Now, what is he talking about? He's I will suggest to you that the book of Revelation deals, and if we were to go through it, I would go through each symbol and establish my position. But each symbol represents an aspect of the Roman Empire. Why? Because this was the problem that was bothering the people at that time. So you say, well, then, Roger, if that's true, if that's really what you believe, why would we ever even read the book of Revelation? Because it doesn't apply to us anyway. Okay, fair question. I will suggest this. At the time, there was no greater power on earth than the Roman Empire. They controlled everything. And the Christians were under the thumb of the Roman government to an extreme position. They could see no way out because they certainly didn't have the military might to go up against the Roman army. In fact, no one had the military might to go up against the Roman army. But God took out the Roman Empire. Now, it wasn't the next day, it wasn't the next month, but within a very short time in the course of history, from the time of writing of the book of Revelation until the Roman Empire was destroyed, was relatively short. Now, those of you who know history, and if you don't, that's okay, but those of you who know history, who destroyed the Roman Empire? It was destroyed by what?
Mongols.
Mongols. Excuse me? No army? No organized anything? A bunch of ragtag wild Indians, we'd call them. That's what they'd be equal to in our culture. Go in and knock out the most fierce army the world had ever seen up to that time, and they're destroyed by a ragtag bunch. Now, how is that possible? Only because God decided that's what he was going to do. God said, I will take out your enemy. Now, what is the underlying lesson of the book of Revelation? The underlying lesson of the book of Revelation is there is no power on earth that Satan can come up with that God can't handle. So why do we need to read it today? What good does it do us? Okay, if God can handle the Roman Empire and crush it into the dust, never to come back, by the way. Rome still exists. Italy still exists. But there is no Roman Empire. It has never resurfaced. It never came back because God said it's true. When I say it's over, it's over. And he said, it's over. Now, if God can handle something as magnificent as the Roman Empire, with all of its money, with all of its power, and with all of its military might, is there a problem that we have today that God can handle?
Maybe after our lifetime, but no.
But he can handle it. He may
Eventually
not choose to handle it in our lifetime, but there's nothing. Okay? You can talk about socialism, you can talk about communism, you can talk about Nazism, you can talk about any ism you want to talk about. Okay? And God can handle it. Can God handle the American power?
Yes.
Yeah. So we're not immune to the possibility of God taking us out.
That's the reason he said, I'm the beginning and the end.
I'm the beginning and the end. I control it all. And that's what the book of Revelation is about, is the proof that God not only could take the evil out, but in fact did take it out. Now, after he took out the Roman Empire, did suddenly everybody become a Christian and it all becomes lovely and rosy down here? No, it doesn't. But did he destroy the Roman Empire? And the answer is yes. Satan was defeated at the fall of the Roman Empire as far as the world was concerned at that moment in time. He was completely destroyed, never to come back. Now, did Satan come back? Sure he did. Yeah, we'll get to that. Not today, but we'll get to that. But yes, Satan comes back, but the Roman Empire doesn't come back. All right, now, I want you to hear this. Hal Lindsey, in his book, There's a New World Coming, quotes these 3 verses from Revelation, the ones we just read. However, surprise, surprise, he does not write one word of explanation regarding any of the 3 verses. He explains nothing. He skips over it because it doesn't fit his narrative. Time is at hand, he says nothing. The time is near, he says nothing. Must soon take place. Hal Lindsey writes nothing. Now this is a commentary on Revelation. And these are phrases that he just somehow never gets around to discussing. Wonder why? Because he can't make it make sense. If he just uses common sense, you have to accept the fact that whatever, well, we can sit and debate now we're blue in the face what the book of Revelation is all about, okay? And people have done it for generations, and they'll do it for generations long after I'm gone. Despite how well I'm going to explain this, they're still going to discuss it, okay? Now, despite the fact of how right I am, they're still going to discuss it, okay? It's not going to be settled in many people's mind, but I believe it's a fair statement to say that anyone that reads the book of Revelation and reads phrases like time is at hand, the time is near and must soon take place, would have to come up with something that happened. If you don't buy the Roman Empire idea, okay, and you're free to choose something else, but what are you going to use? What took place within a near time? There are volumes, for example, written that says that the book of Revelation is talking about the Roman Catholic Church, okay? And they've got all the symbols matching up with the Roman Catholic Church, except the Roman Catholic Church didn't come into existence until centuries after the writing of the book of Revelation. And you're back to the same problem. Okay, what good does it do to tell Christians in one era of something that's not going to take place and warn them and prophesy and try to make them feel better, or at least acknowledge God's in control, when they're never going to see the end result?
Well, none of that stuff took place in the first century where it was written to people. I mean, that was a long time after they died that it actually ended.
But it began, the Roman Empire began to crumble fairly soon after the writing of the book of Revelation. It didn't completely fall apart. It didn't completely end, but you started to see, as it were, cracks in the system. You started to see where things weren't working well for the Romans. The Gauls and company didn't come in and take them over till a while later, but their world, their economy, their lifestyle, everything began to crumble shortly after. Within the first century, it began to show signs of deterioration. So they could see that help is on the way. They may not see the fullness of the complete destruction, but they will see help is right around the corner. We see it coming. We see it falling apart. Just like, for example, and I'm not trying to compare this at all to Revelation, but we saw in our lifetime the fall of communism as it once was, and the tearing down of the Berlin Wall and all these things. Now, does that mean communism's over? No. But did we see where it began to crumble, where it began to fall apart? where the idealism of it started to deteriorate. By the same token, they could see and did see that the Roman Empire was no longer in the same commanding position it had been for all their lifetime, and even before them. So my challenge to anyone, and I'm not meaning this to be ugly, I'm simply saying, because I'm willing to listen and I'm willing to learn. But if you do not want to buy the idea that it is the fall of the Roman Empire, then give me something that took place near to the writing of the book, nearer, if you will, than the fall of the Roman Empire. And I'll consider it. I mean, not that you have to convince me, I'm nobody. But what I'm saying is, it takes it out of the realm of something that's yet to happen today. We're now living in 2020, 2022, actually. Why would God wait 2,000 plus years, 222 years, to fulfill this prophecy, which he said, his angel said, is at hand? It's near. And we have proof in the Bible that near and at hand statements happened shortly after they were spoken. Now, it might be several years. It didn't happen the next day. But within a logical frame of history, it happened quickly and soon, because that's when it was prophesied. Okay, that gives you something to think about, and we're now going to go into different aspects of the end times using Revelation and using the premillennial belief system to contrast and see where they are in error for what they think is going to happen in the future. Obviously, I mean, it's kind of a foregone conclusion that if you accept the reality that the book of Revelation has been fulfilled, then everything they say is yet to come, you can show where it's been fulfilled. It's already been done. They don't see it the same way, and they probably never will. Now, I want to share one more thought with you quickly, because you're going to go home and you're going to think about this, probably. And I don't know that I'm going to cover it, because this is not a class on Revelation. All right, give you this to consider. John says, I saw a city coming out of heaven. And he gives all the dimensions and all the description and all this stuff. Okay. The street is of gold, gates are this, that, and whatever. And, there's a throne and there's all this stuff. Okay. He also says that the strangers are without the city. In other words, there are no bad people in the city. They're all outside. The bad guys are outside and the good guys are inside. What is the city? We would say, most people would say, the city is heaven. Okay? Our songs say it's heaven. Because we write our songs, and it talks about the gates, and it talks about the street, and it talks about stuff, and we apply it to heaven. But if there are people outside the city who are heathen people, where are they? They're not in hell. They're outside the city, it says. So, what is the city? It can't be heaven, despite all the songs we've written and all the sermons probably preached. If you will read it carefully, you will find that it cannot be end of time heaven. What is it then? It is the next thing to heaven, for it is the church. The people inside the church are in a heavenly setting, if you will. And the people outside the church are the heathen outside the church. Now, I only bring that up not to confuse you further. That's not my point. But to help you see that much of what we have taught and been taught and believed doesn't fit exactly what the Bible says. It says that he saw the city coming from where? From coming down from heaven. So therefore, if I'm standing in the city that came from heaven, I'm not standing in heaven. I'm standing in the city that came down from heaven. You can check me out. So all the description that we think we know of heaven, gates, pearls, streets, gold, four square, all these things, there's a good chance that's not describing heaven, but it's describing the church as we know it now. You're still eating of the tree, the people inside the city, according to what it says, have the tree of life and eat the fruit from the tree of life. But if they're in heaven, where else could they be? If they stop eating, they're going to get kicked out of heaven. That doesn't make sense. But what if it's the church? Are we eating? Are we partaking of the fruit from the tree of life? And yes, we are. Because the tree of life comes from Christ. And we partake of Christ, his teaching, the Lord's Supper, all this stuff fits into Christ. Now, because once we're into heaven, whenever that happens, be it at Judgment Day or be it before that, or however God chooses to set that up, we're not going to be needing to eat of the tree of life because we're there. We will live forever. We're not going to be having to eat something to secure our position. More for you to think about. Those of you who never heard me teach on Revelation will probably right now going, I don't know if I believe any of that. And that's fine. You go home and check it out. I don't mind. And if you can come up and explain to me a different scenario, I'm happy to listen. I'll consider it. I'll make you defend it, as I will defend my position. But I'm not saying that I have the exact, total, complete, absolute knowledge on the book of Revelation. But I do find scripture within Revelation that makes me question how we have always presented it. So I hope this has been informative. I hope it's been mind stirring to you, making you think. Again, if you don't agree with me, I don't believe that the test on Revelation is going to be what gets us in or out of heaven. So I'm not sure that we have to absolutely, totally agree on every aspect. But when you start talking about it, and you start considering the possibilities of maybe we haven't always had the right slant on Revelation. To me, it makes the book more interesting, and I won't do it just for that reason, but I can get more peace and more logic out of Revelation doing it this way than trying to use all those symbols for some other set of scenarios that have come up or will come up or whatever. We'll talk about some of those in the next lessons that we cover. This is the introduction. And you may say, I've been introduced and I don't my word to say, and I'll stay home. Because if this is where he's going with it, I'm going to disagree from day one all the way to the end. That will be your choice. But I will try to show how Book of Revelation contradicts the view of premillennialism, that because I haven't seen it take place yet, it must still be in the future. Thank you. And we will get to that 1,000-year reign. We really will. Trust me, I'm going to get there.